Well, there's a little boy who wanted $100 so badly that he prayed for 2 weeks, and finally nothing happened, and he decided to write a letter to God. And so he wrote a letter to God, and he mailed it, and the post office got it, and they didn't know quite what to do with it, and so they decided to deliver it to the president. And so they delivered it to the president, and the president opened it up, and he read the letter, and he thought it was so cute that he took a $5 bill and put it in an envelope, and he mailed it back to the boy. He thought the $5 would, that would be a lot of money for the boy to have, and so the boy received the envelope. Well, the boy wrote a letter back to thank God, and he said, "Dear God, thank you very much for sending the money. However, I noticed that for some reason you had to send it through Washington, D.C. And as usual, those idiots deducted $95. Children are very tactile. They're very, in the sense that they like edges, and they like, things to be kind of solid, and they like to be able to touch and feel things. And my daughter Caroline, when she's in the 4th grade, she'd come home and she'd ask me these questions and stuff, and I'd have all these kind of ethereal answers, like metaphysical answers or metaphors or that sort of thing. And we'd get into an argument all the time. And so all the things I talk with her about, I'd talk in terms of these kind of, highbrow sort of things, and she'd get very frustrated and upset, and I didn't understand why we were arguing. And so one night they had a parents' meeting at the school, and they had this teacher come and talk about childhood development, and one of the things they mentioned was that children, particularly ages 9 through 11, are very black and white. They like to have things very clear, and they like to have their edges defined, and all of that. And so I realized what I was doing, and I shifted, and I started to become very specific about our conversations, and all of a sudden we stopped arguing. And I realized that it's interesting that, we go through stages in our life experience, and in those stages of development, we learn things, and as we learn things, we put them into practice, and as we put them into practice, they change the dynamics of our life experience. And we're all somewhere along the path in our spiritual development. And it isn't that one person is further along, I don't think it's a path that is sort of, one after the other, but it's our own individual path. We're all on some sort of a path or a process for our unfoldment that is right and perfect for us. And so what's important is to know where we're going, to know what we're looking at. And so there are a lot of ways to do that. Our board right now is involved in what's called an Enlightened Leadership Program through the Association of Unity Churches. And as a part of that program, we have to, every 3 months, there's what's called a webinar. And the webinar, if you're familiar with that term, basically it's a seminar that's done over the web, and you can do it you can join in on your computer, so it's live streamed. And so we all do it at the same time, because that way we're all sort of learning the material at the same time. So last Thursday was our webinar for this experience, and the person that was doing the webinar, his name is Cindy Wigglesworth, and she's the president of a company called Conscious Pursuits. And Cindy is obviously very unity-oriented, or we wouldn't have her doing that. And she spoke at our conference last year. And she works with corporate executives primarily in leadership dynamics, helping them to understand the components that they need to bring into their experience and their awareness in order to be leaders in their organizations and their companies. And so what she talked about in the webinar was about the levels of intelligence that we go through in our experience. And she broke them down into 4 categories. We have physical intelligence, we have intellectual intelligence, which we think of as our IQ, then we have emotional intelligence, and then finally we have spiritual intelligence. And she organized them in a pyramid from the bottom, and the bottom is our physical intelligence, and that's the intelligence that we first get in relationship with as a child. As we grow, we learn to use our body, and so we learn about our body and how it works and how it functions and what we can do and what we can't do and all the things that show up around our physicalness and our tactile experience. Well, then we go into school, And school is primarily organized around our IQ, right? Our intellectual intelligence. It feeds us the intellectual, theoretically, the information that we need in order to grow our intellect or our brain or our mind, or however that works. And then we come to our emotional intelligence, or our emotional IQ, is the way she, or EQ is what she, the way she characterizes it. And our emotional intelligence is about developing and managing our relationships. It's learning how to deal with ourselves and with our relationships. So our whole kind of inner world, our emotional thoughts, feelings, and those kinds of things. And then we move, of course, into our spiritual intelligence, which is our relationship to our higher power, our relationship to a higher divine sort of presence. And she talks about this with the corporate executives. I mean, this is kind of the approach that she uses. And she talks about our spiritual life and how that shows up and how that experience is. Now, one of the things that she said that sort of hit me, pretty direct, was she said that the way our brains develop, the way our brains sort of unfold, is that we don't really reach the ability to fully develop our emotional intelligence until about age 24. And that's when the wiring sort of shows up and kind of puts it all together. And so one of the things she said was that, you that are raising teenagers, give yourself a break, because their wires aren't there. And so they're still kind of trying to figure all that out. And so to the extent that we understand that, and we understand that all the wiring's not present, then our expectations begin to change around how it is that we interact with those that are present in our life, especially in those years when they're growing and developing. We also can give ourselves a break, in terms of our own development as well, when we understand that. Now, emotional intelligence is about emotional awareness. It's about being aware of our own thoughts and feelings. And the question, I think, that shows up is, are we aware of, and can we name the feelings that we are experiencing in a given moment, and can we transform them if appropriate? Just think about it right now in this experience. Are you aware of what it is that you are feeling? Not just on a surface level, but even at a deeper level. Are you aware of the emotional energies that are flowing in and out throughout your system? Do you have a sense of what those are? Even though, and part of moving into a space of emotional intelligence is to be able to name those emotions. So if we are feeling anger, to say, that's a feeling of anger. Not to condemn them, or to put them down, or to say we shouldn't do that. An awful lot of the time we learn to suppress certain emotions or to push them aside, or that maybe we get so involved in our intellectual development that we don't really show up in relationship to approaching those parts of ourselves. And so we learn to just sort of discount them and move them aside because they might seem to get in our way. And we start to do that because our brains have not yet been wired. We do that at a young age because our brains haven't been wired to process